Get all those pesky critters out of your campsite. This is our review of Scram.
Scram is a team-based hand management card game featuring woodland creatures, and I always keep an eye out for the Bezier games, and I really like the artwork on this one.
I like the concept of a team-based memory game. However, this one felt like it dragged on a little too long. We'll tell you why after this quick how to play. Players play on teams and set up their campsites with 3 cards face down and 2 cards face up.
On each player's turn, they will draw a card and either switch it out with a card from their campsite or play the card for its ability.
Players want to end the game with the lowest score possible, so they need to strategically eliminate or replace the high cards in their campsite.
Players can eliminate multiple matching cards if they remember where it is in their campsite.
When a player gets down to 2 cards, they can shout Scram to start the end game, and then the other players take 1 turn, and then the game ends.
Teams add up their points from their campsite, and the team with the lower score wins. After a best of 3 or best of 4 series of games, the team with the lower score wins.
So we picked this game up at Gen Con. It's another Bezier Games. They do the One Night Werewolf, which we really love. We've played some of their other games, and we've liked some of the other games, but we haven't loved them as much as Werewolves. And this is another one in that kind of same mentality. Like, I really like this game, I just don't love this game. The thing that I don't like about it is that it does tend to drag on because you have 2 people playing against you that can always add to your opponent or add to you, always increase your score and decrease it. So even if you get down to 2, you gotta wait for it to come back before you can shout Scram, but then someone always adds. I just feel like the game drags on a little bit too long.
Yeah, I think when we were playing, there were times where, let's say I had 3 cards or I had 4, and I knew all of them were like 0s or 1s. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, can I just say Scram? Because I know I'm super low, and I, for the most part, knew my partner too. I was like, I'm pretty sure those are low, so we definitely have this. However, I have to wait till 2 cards.
So you'll draw a card and you get an 8. And it's like, well, I could play it for its ability, which lets me flip 2 cards face up, which could work for me because then I could see him and my teammate could see him, but then the other opponents could see him too. And if they're both 1s or 2s or low scoring, they may want to steal those cards. So if it's an 8 and I replace it, well, I have the 12, so that could work. But if I know I also have a 12 here face down, or if I know my opponent has a 12, I can push those cards out and I can eliminate all of the same number. So this 8, even though it's only 4 less, it could end up actually being like 24 less or 36 less or even more less if I know that there are other 12s out there. So I really like that concept. I wish more of that could have been done, and I think that it's still there. I just don't think enough of it was happening to move the game along quickly enough. But I really do like that you can replace multiple cards if you remember. Really adds to that memory game. Not only your memory, but also your teammates and what they have, and if they've switched anything out and you didn't remember or didn't see. So I like that concept.
But be careful, right? Like, what happens if you get remembered wrong?
So if I know that I have a 10 and a 12, I'm like, okay, they're right here, they're face down. All right, I'm gonna pull the 12. And if I'm right, then I get to get rid of both of the 12s. However, if I got them mixed up, I'm like, oh yeah, I have this 12, and I flip it over, I'm like, oh crap, it's the 10, it's not a 12. I have to put it back over, and I have to draw another card and add it to my campsite. So you gotta really remember and really trust that you remember, or trust that you know where it is on your teammate's campsite as well. So I like that concept.
Yeah, that team-based mechanic is pretty fun because that oh, I'll help you. Boom, yeah, go team. And so you can do that. However, if you're like, oh, I'll help you. Sorry.
I also feel like the way you draw the card and then you can either use the ability or switch it out kind of slows it down because you are like, oh, well, this ability, but then I should switch it out. It's usually the high cards that have the ability. So for the most part, towards the end game, you're always going to be using the ability. Why would you ever switch out the high card unless you know you can replace multiple cards? So you're always just using the ability. So I always felt this like draw, use the ability, draw, use the ability. And at that point, it does really become a luck of the draw factor because it's always like, oh, I draw the 13, haha, I'm gonna mess with you guys. Or it's, haha, I drew the one where I can play a 9 and then get rid of 2 card. Or haha, I can switch them. I know that you have a 1, I'm gonna switch it with this.
In terms of the artwork at the top, I said I really like the artwork. And I mean, for the most part, it's not anything like super complicated or like 3D rendering like real life. It's just like simple vector art. Like shapes and everything. And it's just, I don't know, I just like the look of those types of cards or that artwork.
So if you know what their cards are, but they may not know what their cards are, and they play a card that lets them like switch something out or do something, you need to be watching what they're doing. So you can't just do your turn and wait for it to get back to your turn. You have to know when your teammate is going, you have to be paying attention to what they're doing too. Because the last thing you want is for them to have switched something and then you'd be like, oh wait, what? You switched something? What did you switch?
One of the games we played, we weren't on the same team, and I almost felt like you were getting in my head because one of the cards lets me see 2 cards. So I'd be like, okay, partner, let's take a look. And I saw them and I put them back. And then, maybe another turn went by and then Kenny goes, you didn't switch his cards, did you? Like when you looked at him, you weren't just like, oh, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, why would I do that? But did I? Like, I'll go back to the artwork. It's not too complicated. It's just, here's an animal. I like how they drew that animal. It looks fun. It looks cute, especially these little otters. I think that's what kind of prompted you, right? Because you wanted that otter pin and they're just sitting there holding hands.
Overall, I like the concept of the team-based memory game where I'm trying to memorize what I have, your teammates trying to memorize what they have, then you also have to try to memorize what each other has, and you're playing cards, trying to get to the lowest score. I like the concept of what's going on. I think they need to make a couple tweaks to it, but overall, I really like that team-based memory game concept. What did you not like about the game?
When you draw the card and you decide to play the ability or put it in your campsite, like what's showing sometimes, it'd be nice that if you switch out the cards, then you could play this ability that you're switching out. However, if you didn't, then it's just like, oh, okay, I'm just throwing that away and like net neutral or just nothing happens, I guess.
Yeah, that would be an interesting way to counteract the fact that all the high cards have the abilities, because you might be like, oh, I want this ability, but later on in the game, so I'm going to play that high card now, knowing that I'll be able to use it later. That could have been an interesting mechanic, where it's so that you actually use those high cards. Because the thing that I don't like about it right now is that all the high cards have all the good abilities, so why would you ever play the high card? You're always going to use the high card for the abilities. You don't have that dilemma of the low cards having good abilities. You just, well, of course I'm going to keep the low card. Whereas if you had the high card, you can save it for later. That might be like, oh yeah, well, I want to put this here, so I'll risk changing it with something I don't know so that I can use that ability later on.
Overall, I'm always interested to see what Bezier, their new games they have, especially at Gen Con, because sometimes it's long lines and stuff. But when we saw this, saw the artwork, I liked it. It's fun as a small box game, playing it at the beginning of the night. So I'll probably give it like a 5.
Overall, I liked it a lot about this game. I think I like the concept more than the execution. However, I feel like I'll still play it, just not as often as I would other games. So I'm going to give it a 6. And that was our review of Scram.
What'd you think? Does it sound very endearing to you? Let us know in the comments below.
And if you're enjoying our content, please like this video, subscribe to our channel.
Until next time, I'm Lee.
And I'm Kenny. I go party like a board gamer.